Happy holidays, my ex-homies. It's your friend Jacob Gooden, the host of the best ex-homeschooler podcast this side of the internet. That is the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. And man, oh man, we are winding down 2024. This is the last episode of the year. I'm so stoked for it. You got me today. It's going to be a solo episode. I told you that December was the month of the Goodens, and I'm delivering, okay? So first week of December, you got an interview with my mom. Second week, you got an interview with my dad. And here we are in the third week, you're getting an interview with me. Then we're taking a week off because we're going to celebrate Christmas. And so what are we going to talk about today? What am I sharing? Well, today I'm sharing my religious experience, my Christian journey, if you will. And I really wrestled with this episode because when I started this podcast, I really felt like, yeah, we're going to touch on faith and religion a little bit. We have to, right? But I didn't ever really want to share my story, not because I'm ashamed of it or anything like that, but I just kind of wrestled with it. And the more I've done this show, the more I've realized that my religious experience is so tied into my homeschool journey that I would be doing myself a disservice and I'd be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't explain the things that I believed during my homeschool time and then now, as an adult, the things that I believe today. So we're going to do that. But before we do, I got a couple things. First and foremost, I wanted to say thank you. If you've been a listener, a watcher, a commenter, somebody who's followed me on social media, thank you so much. You've made this show what it is today. It's been far greater of an experience than I could ever imagine. I really thought the show would do nothing. I think that's what every podcaster says when they get started, is that they can't imagine their show actually getting views and listens. But this show has definitely done so much more than even just that, right? Those are vanity numbers. But the connections, the reconnections I've made with people, right, and the new connections with other homeschool kids have been absolutely amazing. So thank you so much. I can't tell you, words can't even describe how grateful I am for each and every one of you, truly. That being said, I've got a favor to ask. Actually, two. One is that if you like this show and you listen to it on the regular, maybe you share it with a friend. Send it their way during this holiday season. Say, hey, you've got some time. I know you've got some time because it's holiday break. Take a listen, see what you think, maybe reconnect with some old homeschool friends. And do that if you wouldn't mind. I would greatly appreciate it. The second thing is I want to hear from you guys. I want to know how I can continue to make this show better. I want to know guests that you want to have on, topics you want to discuss. I want to know if we were to build a community outside somewhere, whether it's Reddit or Discord or Slack or I don't know, WhatsApp, something like that. I want to know. So I have a quick survey. It's going to be the top link in the description, in the show notes, whatever. It's going to be down there somewhere. Okay. Just click down there. Okay. And it's 6 questions. Okay. It's super easy. One of them is your email, which probably will autofill in. The second one is your name. Super easy. And then I've got a couple questions about stuff about the show. So if you don't mind, fill that out for me. I greatly appreciate it. It helps me so much. And so those are my 2 favors. The third thing I wanted to say before we get started is that I'm really nervous about this episode. It's been a lot harder to prep for this episode than I think any other episode that I've done, including the purity culture one. And I know purity culture touched a lot on religion, but this one is just much more personal because it's my experience. And I know that when you share your religious experiences on the internet, it opens you up to criticism. When you share anything on the internet, it opens you up to criticism. It opens you up to hate. It opens you up to people being allowed to say whatever they want about you. And so I have wrestled with that. I've shared some of my religious stuff online before, and I've had hurtful comments thrown my way, and I don't know. It's just it's been something that's been scary for me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I guess my third favor that I have to ask is that if you do want to comment and you do want to engage with this, like, please be loving, be gentle, be kind. This is my corner of the internet, and I do reserve the right to, if you're going to be mean and hateful, like, you will get blocked. I don't care. I'm open to having discussion, and I'm open to disagreement. What I'm not open to is hate, just being thrown for hate's sake. So, yeah, I don't know really how else to say that. I don't expect there to be hate, but, you never know, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So, enough of me stalling. I guess let's kind of get into my story. And, man, this is a lot harder than I expected. So, where does my Christian journey begin? Let's start there, I guess. So, growing up, I remember always going to church. I have my parents are Christians. They are Christians. They still go to church to this day. And so I just remember going to church. That was just a consistent thing in my life for pretty much my entire life. And I want to say when I was around the age of between 6 and 8, and I know my parents can probably confirm or deny if this is correct or not, but there was a Billy Graham crusade that came to town somewhere, and my dad took me and my sister and my grandpa, and we went to this Billy Graham crusade. Now, a part of the Billy Graham organization, they have Salty the Singing Songbook, and he is basically, or they are, I'm not even sure what Salty is, but Salty is basically Barney Christianified, I guess. It's this gigantic book with arms and legs and eyes that dances around and sings songs, and it's basically Christian Barney, for lack of a better term. But at the end of the show, they did an altar call, and I remember tugging on my dad's shirt and saying, "Hey, I want to go down there, and I want to accept Jesus into my heart." And so we did, and he took me down there, and one of the team members that was down there kind of walked me through the ABCs of becoming a Christian, and which is to A is to admit your sins, B was to accept and believe in Jesus Christ, and C was confess your faith in Jesus as Savior and Lord. And so I remember vividly doing that. And I remember I don't even, like, I can't, again, it's so vivid in my memory. It's hard to even describe. I just remember being a kid and doing this and really believing for the first time ever that I was like, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. And so that happened. And I won't say that much changed in my life. Like, I still just went to church and Sunday school and did church activities and things like that. And so like I said, I don't really remember it changing a whole lot. Did VBS, and I was just like a normal church kid, right? And so during that time, it was just kind of like, I guess, building the foundation of my faith, right? I would read the Bible and do Bible studies with friends and all that kind of stuff. And so a few years later, past that, I want to say between 8 and 10 years old, is when I got baptized. And again, my choice. My parents never forced me to do any of this. But I chose to get baptized, and that is, you presenting to your church saying, I'm choosing to live a Christian lifestyle, and, I want to walk with God, basically. And so I remember doing that. At the time, we went to a little Baptist church in the Ojai Valley, and it was like a little dunk tank, and pastor put me under, asked me a couple questions, and came out, and, the church applauded, kind of a thing. There's really two main churches when I talk and think about my faith journey that stand out to me. And I attended more churches than this, but there's really two that were, like, I think the backbone for my Christian experience. And so that is Ojai Valley Baptist, as I said, and I went there pretty much, I was a young kid when we started going there, and I went there till I was about 14 years old. And then I went to Reality Ventura through high school and then into some college. And so they shaped me in a lot of ways into who I am today and into my Christian experience. And so I said this before, but Ojai Valley Baptist was kind of, I would say, where the foundation of my Christianity comes into play. And then Reality was like the place where I feel like I made my faith my own, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. But so Ojai Valley Baptist built like it was the foundation in that I was being taught the Bible. I was being taught very traditional Christian values. Um, you know, go to church, read my Bible, go home, read my Bible. One of the big things I remember learning there was like the importance of serving, and that being a huge part of Christianity is like serve other people, right? Love other people, serve them. And I saw that played out through like my parents and other people inside the church. My parents were like the treasurers at the church, and I want to say that they like led Bible studies at different points and all this kind of thing. And so being the good little Christian boy that I was, I wanted to mimic that. I wanted to, emulate that in a lot of ways. And so that meant a lot of things, right? Cleaning up around the church. It meant, playing guitar with the worship team. It meant like serving, like doing sound or like helping with Awana and like all these things. And being just very much involved in church activity, I guess. And I was a big time music nerd. I think around the age of 10, again, my parents can confirm or deny this, but around the age of 10 is when they told me that I had to learn an instrument, and I picked guitar. And so I spent like 8 plus, no, it was more than that. I spent close to a decade playing guitar. And, so by the time I was 12, I think I'd been playing for 2+ years. At that point, I was starting to get asked to serve in church on the worship team and play like special music and stuff like that. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I can't even tell you how much. It was just like, it was amazing. It was what I wanted to do. And it was interesting because the church, again, we're going to Ojai Valley Baptist at this time. It's very conservative, traditional, old school church. A lot of hymns. We mostly had organ and piano worship, so guitar was kind of a new mix. The worship pastor at the time was trying to contemporize it a little bit. That's not even a word, but we were trying to play more contemporary Christian music. Most of the people there were okay with the fact that like, I would get up there and play acoustic guitar with him and it sounded good and things like that. But as I got older, got an electric guitar, the worship pastor wanted to kind of like make it more contemporary, right? So, let's put some electric guitar in the mix. And we had a bass player at church, and he was trying to find a drummer and all these things. And I just vividly remember like after church one week, and like a church member coming up to me and basically telling me that like I was too loud and my electric guitar was too loud, and that basically like rock music didn't have a place in church. And I was like really crushed, I think, as a kid, because that was what spoke to me, right? Like that was if you've read the Bible, you know that music is pretty big in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. There's a lot of, there's a whole freaking book in the Bible that's just songs. And so I would read these things, and I felt like music is this escape for the soul, right? It is this connection to something bigger than ourselves. Ideas, beliefs, whatever it is, not to get too woo-woo with it, but like it connects you to bigger things. And so it was hard for me to hear that, because here I was 12, 13 years old, really wanting to like pursue a really healthy relationship with God, and music was a way that I felt like I connected with God. And so to be told that like basically has no place in church was just tough, right? It was just not what I wanted to hear. And really it was coming from old people who they were just stuck. They were just stuck in, they wanted to hear hymns and they wanted what they wanted. And I think it was tough too. If you have ever been to a Baptist church, you know that they tend to be, I don't know if political is the correct word here, but they tend to be like this democratic process. At least ours was. We voted on freaking everything. And I remember this again, a very distinct memory. This is ultimately, I think, what really turned me off to going to church there was we had a meeting of the church members, and we were asked, I was young, right? I was 13 at the time, and like being asked like, well, what about church would draw more young people? We needed more young people at the church. That was what we were trying to solve. And they asked me, because I was 13, and I said, well, I want louder music. I want rock and roll, right? I want pastors who are like, you know, like fun. I want children's church was always kind of a mess at our church because it was, I don't know, I felt like there wasn't enough young adults or even sometimes kids to warrant always having Sunday school and things like that. But yeah, just like I remember saying that and then just kind of being shot down and being like, that's not it. Like, don't listen to him. It's like, well, okay. So I say that gets us to church number 2. That gets us to reality is basically what I'm getting at. And so around that time of 13, I think it was the summer, I was going to turn 14. I was going to freshman year of high school, and my best friend at the time, he invited me to go to youth group with him. And I was like, okay, because my church didn't have a youth group because there was hardly any youth there. And so I go, reality, it was amazing. It was like everything I could have dreamed for, right? The music was loud. It was rock and roll. The pastor was relatable. We played fun games. Everybody was cool. Like, and I remember being like, if Sunday is anything like this, then like, this is the kind of church I want to go to. And it was like, I remember just being so, like, I was in love with it. I was just instantly in love with it, right? I felt like I could finally have a community of people who could push me towards being a better Christian, right? And who we just related, right? We could be strong together. You know, the Bible says that like multiple cords together are stronger, right? And it's like a rope. And so I remember going to my parents and kind of being like, hey, I'm really fed up at Ojai Valley. I'm just kind of like dying. I don't like going. I don't look forward to going on Sundays. I don't feel like I can even serve because I just get told I'm doing it wrong all the time. I want something new, right? And I'm really thankful that I had parents who they listened and they didn't judge, but they heard me, and I think my sister was kind of echoing some of the same things I was, and so they listened to us and they said, okay, like let's try something different, and they were heavily involved in that church. And so it took a little while because they had to end their commitments there, but they were like, okay, let's go to some other churches. And so I think we went to like 2 churches. We had decided as a family, we were going to tour a couple churches and go a couple weeks and, feel it out and make pros and cons lists and whatever else and decide. And I think we went to 2 churches and then we were like, reality's the place. And I was stoked. My friends were there. Like I said, I just felt like it lit a new fire inside of me for Christianity. And reality is the place I feel like I made my faith my own. And what do I mean by that? I think it's been hard to define it, to be honest. And I'm looking at my notes because I'm like, what did I write down to kind of explain this? And the way I always viewed Christianity and our relationship with God was through this lens of relationship, right? It's a personal relationship between you and God, right? And so prayer is the way that you talk to him. And prayer doesn't always have to be the super formal, like, dear God, whatever. It could just literally be a conversation. That's just how I view it. That was my understanding of God, right? And of how things worked. And so I always viewed it as this personal relationship thing, and that God was there, and there was rules, and there was expectations, and there was kind of this. The Bible was not a rule book, so to speak, but a guidelines, I guess, of like, here's what following me looks like, and if you struggled with it, you'd talk to God about it. And then you'd also talk to your fellow Christians about it and be like, how can I be better at this, right? So when we got to reality, I felt like I finally had that. I had people around me who I was going to a church of people who allowed children to speak. That is a key point that I wanted to say as well. Ohio Valley Baptist for me felt like a church where children were kind of still these things that were like to be seen and not heard. And that's not 100% true, but it definitely felt it. There was a generation of people at that church who were kind of like, they would not acknowledge that the kids had these like spiritual needs, so to speak. Whereas reality, it felt like that was a huge part of their ministry, was making sure that kids were seen and heard, and given like tools, right? And so going to reality, I got really tied into the youth group. I got really tied into like serving. I was on the worship team. I helped with the sound team, doing PowerPoint. Like, I went to junior high camp with kids as like a leader. Like, I think what I felt like was good Christian boy behavior. So, I was serving others inside of the church. To be honest, I don't know that I was serving many people outside of the church who arguably are the people who need it more. But I was serving people inside the church, and living in community with people who were strengthening me, were backing me up on things I believed, that kind of a thing. And so, where do I want to go from here? Let me check my notes. Again, I told you guys, this was a hard episode for me to like put, because there's so many thoughts and there's so many nuances and so many rabbit holes I could go down and talk for hours about this stuff. So let me look here. Okay. I think this is important to share. I would argue that I have friends from that time who would say I maybe wasn't the most evangelistic person. Christianity calls us to spread religion to spread the message of Christ to all corners of the earth, right? And some people are much more charismatic and able to like go do that and be missionaries and all those kinds of things. I've never really been that way. I build long-lasting relationships and friendships, and with people who are like my ride or dies. And again, this comes back to my interpretation of the Bible and things I read about. And I have always felt like the Bible shows us that people have different skills and to lean into your skills, right? And that there's a place for you at the table. And so I always felt like my place was not evangelism, in the sense of like, let me go out on the streets and just talk to people and like lead them to Christ right there on the street. Like, evangelism for me was, again, relationship, right? I talked about my relationship with God was very personal. It was very one-on-one, or one-on-three if you believe in the Holy Trinity. That's also kind of how I viewed like evangelism, right? Is this one-on-one relationship with people. And I felt like you could always go so much further if you just had genuine relationship with people. And so I remember when I was in college, I interned at my dad's office, and I had like data entry. It was like the worst job in the world. So boring, but pop in a podcast, do my work, and be done. But one day I'm having lunch, and this woman who I had met her before, but I didn't know her very well, comes in, and I'm sitting there, and I'm eating lunch alone. I'm like on my phone scrolling, and she comes over and she asks if she could sit with me and talk with me. And I was like, okay, sure. And we start talking, and she's like, oh, you're Keith's son, right? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, yeah, you guys are just like different, aren't you? And I was like, what? I was like kind of taken aback because I was just like, what? That's like kind of rude to say. And she's like, I don't mean it in a rude way. I just mean it in a like, there's something about you guys that's like different and like special. And again, this doesn't sound great, right? but what she was, so we start talking, and what it really boiled down to was she felt this like that we were genuine people who genuinely connected. And I was like, okay. And she's like, yeah, when you see me, you always say hello and you ask me how I am. And it feels like you actually like, give a shit about me as a person and you're listening to what I have to say and things like that. And I was like, oh, interesting. And she's like, why do you think that is? Like, why do you think you are that way? Or like, how are you that way? And at the time I was a Christian still. And so I said, well, I'm a Christian and a part of my religion is that it's caring for people, right? It's being there for them. It's actually like giving a shit about them. And I didn't really push it. I was like, I wasn't about to be like, oh, you should come to church with me. Or like, I don't know what her religion was. She could totally have been a Christian as well. But like, that's what I mean when I say that, like, for me, evangelism is this relational thing where it's like, if I had lunch with her again, we could either continue that conversation about genuine connection with people. We could go down a more religious rabbit hole. The door had been opened, I guess, so to speak. Again, that's just how I've always viewed it. It's relationship. It's genuinely caring about people. That's how I viewed Christianity and evangelism. And so that's kind of a side tangent of this whole thing. But again, trying to give you guys an understanding of my belief system, right? And I guess I didn't make it very clear. Christianity for me, what that meant, what I believed in, was that God created the world, 7 days, 7 nights. On that seventh day, he rested. He created Adam and Eve, who were the first man and woman. They messed up and they sinned, which is why we've all fallen short. And for many, many years, God worked in these mysterious ways. He built the nation of Israel, all of these things. And then thousands of years later, he came and spoke to a woman named Mary. Mary was a virgin, and she gave birth to a son. That is the Son of God, Jesus Christ. And he grew up to be the Savior of the world. He died the ultimate death on a cross to pay for our sins. And so that is what I'm talking about when I talk about Christianity for me. Those were the things I believed in. And again, that's very glossed over. There's a lot more nuance to it, but I'm trying to keep it brief, guys. I know I'm running long here, but so where are we? College. Let's talk about college. Okay. So after high school, reality was amazing. Reality, like I said, I felt like it gave me a place to make my faith my own, really, and serve people. And so when I got to college, I chose a college. It was a Christian college, and also it was small. And I did that because it was comfortable. I was used to the homeschool bubble, and inside of that homeschool bubble, it felt like so many people, we all believe the same thing, right? Even though we had small disagreements on some things, and I think maybe bigger disagreements behind the scenes is what I'm learning doing this podcast. But for the most part, we kind of believe the same thing. We were all kind of in this bubble of Christianity, homeschool weirdness type of thing. And so college, I didn't want to veer too much out of that. I feel like I was already scared to leave home. And so I chose a school that was safe, right? It was a Christian college, there was actually a decent number of homeschoolers there. But it felt like that homeschool youth group bubble, still. And so I got there. Now, this school was so Christian. We had a lifestyle agreement, so we were not allowed to drink. We were not allowed to smoke. We were not allowed to do drugs. We were not allowed to have premarital sex. We were not allowed to, in addition to premarital sex, were not allowed to have gay sex. I'm trying to remember. There was other things as well. We had commitment to being at chapel a certain number of times every semester. It was not a requirement, but it was highly suggested that you join a church, that you be involved in Bible studies and things like that. And which, as somebody who was already kind of used to that kind of lifestyle of going to church every Sunday, going to youth group once a week, serving in ministry some other way during the week sometimes, it was normal to me. And so when I got to school, I very quickly, I didn't also really understand that there were certain things that were more we want you to do this, but we understand like it's not 100% possible. So by the end of my first semester, I found myself, I was going to church like 6 times a week. It was crazy. It was just a lot. And it ultimately resulted in me kind of burning out of church. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the other thing that school was teaching me was it was really the first time too that I was in an environment where I took a religion class my first year. We talked about a lot about Christianity and the difference between, what is a Baptist versus like Catholic versus Wesleyan versus this, and then all of the difference in between, all that stuff. And so the first day of class, the professor comes in and he's asking us all these questions, right? He's asking us about like the 7-day creation, and he's asking us why we believe that. He's asking us if we believe in Noah's Ark, and could the flood have not really been global? Could it have been all these other things, right? And what he was trying to do, I look back on it and I realize he's trying to push us to defend our faith. But I didn't have good answers for him, to be quite honest. I just had answers that were like, well, my pastor told me this, and my my parents told me this, and my science textbook told me this, and like all those kind of things. Because yes, I did do Christian Science, and so I didn't have a strong understanding of even like what evolution was. And later down the line in college, I also took a science and religion class, and that was like crazy because we talked about like how evolution and the Bible can both be true. We talked about like all of these things, right? That were just like, I had always been like the Ken Ham boy, right? Like I had just like watched so many Ken Ham videos and like was like bought into that whole thing. And so to hear these opposing things was kind of like, I don't want to say it like wrecked my faith, because it didn't, but it definitely opened me up to asking questions and being comfortable asking questions and being like, okay, well, maybe I'm not so sure. So all that to say, let's go back to 6 days a week. So going to church 6 days a week, okay, 3 chapels, a Vespers service, church on Sunday, and then usually a college group of some kind that was like off campus. So 4 on-campus things, 2 off-campus things. And I mean, I was like serving hard in these things. I mean, that church was like a startup church. I got plugged in like literally the first week of school, maybe the second week of school. We would build this whole church on Sunday morning inside of a movie theater, do worship, run sound, whatever I needed to do, like help tear it all down, put it all away in storage. Like, I don't know. It was just doing what I thought I was supposed to do, right? It was just serve. And then chapel 3 times a week. Like that gets really hard. For anybody who's done college, you know that like coursework is just really hard sometimes. It's really heavy. It was a lot, and it resulted in me just getting to a point where I was like, I need time for myself. I needed time for me, which I think is really healthy and really normal for a lot of people. So I just kind of burned out. Now, let's jump back into the questioning, right? The classes, right? So I have these professors in college who are asking me questions about like Noah's Ark and if it's real and how much of the Bible is parable and how much is truth and how much is historically accurate and how do we back these things up, right? They're college professors. They're just pushing us to answer questions. That's just what they do, right? And I can hear a couple people, I just know the comments that sometimes come when you start to like question those things, right? Is like people do this like, well, that's where faith comes in, stupid, or like, you have to have faith in things unseen, and like, how do we know this is true, and all those types of things. But it was a thread that I wanted to pull, right? It was a thread I wanted to understand more, and I wanted to kind of like, I wanted to have a better understanding of like, could you be a Christian and believe in evolution, right? So let's pull that thread. Could you be a Christian and believe that like the story of Noah's Ark is like not real? Okay, pull those threads, right? And so just doing lots of research, listening to shows, listening to podcasts, listening to scientists. I remember watching Bill Nye on YouTube, like in my room, just over and over and over, because I don't remember watching Bill Nye as a kid. And so hearing what he had to say, and a lot of it's really cool. I mean, it's just science experiments. It's just, how to blow up a balloon with, mixing this with that and, whatever else. But it was really cool to like hear these like differing opinions and start to like, okay, well, why do they believe that? Where's the proof of that? Okay. And then compare it to someone like a Ken Ham. One of the best things I think anybody can go watch, if you grew up like me, inside of like the creationism science bubble, uh, Ken Ham has built an ark here it's like in the Midwest. I think it's in Kentucky or something like that. Bill Nye came and visited, and they walked through together, and they filmed the whole thing, and they discussed it, and they disagreed on things. And anyway, I think it's really, really cool. Or if you come from the perspective of like more like an evolution creationism kind of creation viewpoint, I think it's interesting as well to hear Ken Ham's side of that. So that's a little resource. I think it's on YouTube, but yeah, go find it. Ken Ham and Bill Nye debating. It was really interesting. So I also just had all these questions, right? And I would go to church, and the thing about church is pastors speak with such conviction and such certainty sometimes. And that can be really hard when you're someone who's doubting a lot of things, because you're going, okay, I want to trust this person. And I understand that for them, they firmly believe this. But they don't always necessarily, they're maybe not an expert in it. They might also, like I was, just kind of be going off of, well, this is what my pastor taught me, and this is what my parents told me was correct, for a number of years. And so it was a lot. It was a lot. And so I burned out. I think I just had so much religion crammed into my head from all angles for those 3 years that I was in college, that I just was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I just need like it to stop. It's like a voice in your head that will not shut up, right? And you're just like, shut up. And the only thing I think I can compare it to is, again, in college, leading up to college, I was an avid reader, right? I read like insane numbers of books. And that's not to toot my own horn. That's just the reality of what it was. Like, I read all of Little House on the Prairie like in a week, the whole series. It's like 7 books. It's like a book a day. It's crazy. I like devoured books. My dad could not keep up when I read Lord of the Rings. It was like, sorry, Dad. It's like the Flash racing against the turtle. Like, it's, it was crazy. So, but when I got to college, I could crank through textbooks. So it was good. Like, it was good. I had that skill to be able to really get through things really quickly. But by the time I got out, I was just like, I can't read any more books. Like, I was just like burned out of this. Like, I thought books were terrible. And it took a long time to really get back the spark of like, okay, books, I can read again. And here we are now, 2024. And I'm finally like really reading again. I've read books, but I'm just like really avidly reading. So it's been a while. I graduated in 2017. So it's been a number of years to fully get it back. Now, okay. So also when I talk about like burning out of church, that was not me leaving religion. It was not me being like, I'm no longer a Christian, nothing like that. It was just me leaving church. I was like, it's too much of a commitment for me to do right now, where I couldn't go to church and not feel like I had to serve. And I knew I needed to be, I had lunch with a pastor who had said, you just need to be in a time of like receiving. Like you've poured out a lot, and now you need to be in a time of receiving. And so I just quit. I quit going to church. I still read my Bible. I still identified as a Christian. But things were like changing, right? Like I said, like I was, in addition to reading the Bible, I was also starting to read these other books, and I was starting to listen to experts, right? Scientific experts, and like kind of figuring out what I believed, right? And this ties into like, so what finally made me like call it quits with Christianity? And there's 2 parts to this. There's the part of Christianity where I saw people inside of Christianity not treating other human beings like human beings, and just being hateful and disgusting, to be quite honest. And then the second part of that was, as I continued to research and ask questions, I got to a place where I couldn't believe the Bible was like accurate and was like truthful, to be honest. And so growing up, the Bible was it was the inherent word of God. It was perfection. It was like, you don't doubt it. It is ultimate truth, right? If you ever wonder anything, you could always rely on the Bible to be true. And so when I began to question that, and again, that came down to, I started to realize that I was like, I don't know that I believe in like a literal 7-day creation. I believed in like something different. I was like, yeah, I can explain it inside the Bible, but to me it was like evolution over courses of time. But God is a part of it, and God has a hand in it, and it is 7 days technically, but it's not 7 days, it's millions of years, or whatever. Like, I started to have these differing opinions on what the Bible was saying. There's this thing that pastors love to do. If you've been to church, you know what I'm talking about. Pastors do this thing where they talk about like the word love, for instance, and they go if you look back at the Greek or the Hebrew of this, book, right? The book of Matthew or whatever, it's this word in that, and that can mean it's this like undying love, right? They go deep on like, it's this word that's bigger than the word that it's been translated to. And one that's like kind of cringy, not gonna lie. Sorry, it is. But two, I started to kind of like be interested in understanding like, how is the Bible translated, right? And so I started listening to these podcasts with guys who had worked on these committees that would translate the Bible and rewrite them. And so like, how is why is the NLT different than the NSV, and why is it different than King James, and like who is choosing to translate these into English? And then like, are we taking the English translation and translating that into other languages, or are we taking the original Hebrew and Greek and translating that into different languages? Like, how does all this work? How do we decide like new Bible translations and all these things, right? And so I highly encourage people, and I'm going to try to find some other resources. It's been a number of years since I went down some of this rabbit hole, but I'm going to try to find some other resources and put them below, of just like people I would listen to kind of like understand where these things come from. And what I was coming to, what I was being met with as I was researching this, was like the King James version, for instance, is like, it's called the King James version because King James is the one who had it translated into English, and he had a say in what went in the Bible, right? And why certain books are not included and why they are. And, again, we have disagreements with other religions, right? Christianity and Judaism and Mormonism and Latter-day Saints, they all kind of share some similarities and similar books. We disagree on some things. People are not going to like that I just lumped all those together. I don't blame you. But there is a shared commonality, even Islam, right? There's a shared commonality sometimes with the readings of those texts and the understanding of those texts, right? And they just differ in, books and things like that. So anyway, I digress a little bit, but the King James Version, learning about that and really understanding what was going on and why was he doing this and how was he using his influence to twist what was being said in the Bible so he could do things that he wanted to do. And so then you start to question, right? Again, it goes back to this question, like, can I trust the Bible? Because it's obviously been fucked up by man. It's been bastardized, to be quite honest. And words that mean one thing have taken on new meanings. It's like in my grandpa's lifetime that like homosexuality even like entered the Bible, as far as like certain language goes, right? And that's crazy to me. So I don't know, just like understanding where that translation came from, really, I think it blew the doors open for me to kind of be like, I really just questioned this a lot. Now, to go back to that first thing I mentioned, was seeing Christians not act like Christians towards other people. And this was something I had seen early on in high school, junior high even. And I saw it in myself. how do I want to say it? When I was 13 to 15, we talked about the red pants on the show. We talked about the red pants, how cringy they were. I liked bright colored clothing, okay? I had pink shirts. I had purple shirts. Purple was my favorite color. It's been for a long time. I liked wearing bright colors. And when I was going to Ojai Valley Baptist, I had this like pink shirt, and I had a couple other shirts they were just fun. They had just fun patterns, and they're bright and obnoxious and whatever. And I remember this lady coming up to me after church and just blatantly asking me if I was gay. And I was like, no, because being gay was a sin. That's what I grew up believing. And I was really like taken aback. I just remember saying no, and then just like we moved on from that conversation. It was just like over. It was like a done deal. But it sat with me for so long because I was like, wait, what? Like the way I dress makes me gay, which felt weird. And then also like, if I was, what were you going to do about it? I don't really know. Like, and I don't know because that person, I wasn't. So there was no action taken after that point. But I say that to say that in high school and then especially in college, I was around people who we didn't talk about these things. When homosexuality came up, it was like just kind of this like abomination. It was this thing that was just not okay. I don't think anybody was equipped to talk about it. And so we just didn't. We made gay jokes and stuff like that, and we just didn't, to be quite honest. And when I got into college is when I really, I think, started to see like hatred towards LGBTQ. I saw racism for the first time. I moved from California to St. Louis area, right over the border in Illinois. And I was like 2 towns over from a town that had like an active Ku Klux Klan. And would go shopping with, like, I went shopping with a friend who was black. And like literally he got called like the N-word and like all kinds of things by just white people. And it was just wild. It was just like this weird experience. And again, I know some people will say like, oh, well, those people, you don't know if they're Christians or not. That's true to some degree. But what I started to realize was I saw the people around me who were quote unquote Christians, right? Who claimed to love God and want to emulate Jesus in everything that they do. And then when it come to, oh, let's invite like, this gay guy over, they just like were super weird about it and super uncomfortable, and they didn't want anything to do with that person, and they struggled to like let them into any church type activity and like all these things. And I just like, I don't know, it just gives you an icky feeling, right? It's just when you're reading the Bible and you read about the fact that like Jesus sat at a table with like the worst of the worst people, and he had conversation with them, and he laughed, and they drank together, and they hung out, right? Not to say they were friends, but they were friendly. And I didn't see that emulated. And so it was just this massive turnoff to like Christianity. And then as I got older, I started to see my friends that I had grown up with as they started to, I think we started to like sexually awaken to some degree, and come into our own. And the people who stepped into being gay or being bisexual or being a lesbian or transitioning or whatever it was, how they were received by friends was like really apparent. It was apparent who the people were who were like, yeah, we're still friends. Let's go. Like, let's have fun. Let me ask questions. Let me be inquisitive and try to understand better, know how to not be offensive, right? People were growing, and then other people were just stuck in the same way of being like, this is an abomination, and, how could you ever be a Christian, kind of a thing. And so that's really, those two things, really, I think they put the nail in the coffin of me being like, I can't believe in this anymore. And I don't see this as healthy. Now, I'm not here to judge and to say that you're one of those Christians. I know plenty of Christian people who I think are very loving. And I know Christian people who are not. I say all these things. This is my experience. These are the things that I've seen in my life. And they're what got me to where I am today. So what do I believe today? I guess. What did this all lead to? What did I eventually decide on? I really, for a while, I think I went down the atheist rabbit hole and being like, there is no God, right? And I don't sit there today. I say that I'm agnostic. And what I mean by that, my definition is that I don't believe in the God of the Bible. But I also don't believe that there's like nothing out there, right? Like there's something bigger and arguably greater than us out there. I don't know if it's a god, if it's gods, if it's aliens, if it's just like a different realm, right? A different dimension, the fourth dimension. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. And I'm like, and I choose to be comfortable in that, like in that questioning of like, what is it? What could it be? Right. There's a great duo on YouTube, Rhett and Link. They have a podcast called Ear Biscuits, and they did a whole series of their deconstruction journey, and they do these checkups every year, and they talk about things that they have just learned and where they are, where they sit. And one of them calls themselves a hopeful agnostic, I guess is the way he puts it. And what he means by that is that he's like, he's like, I hope that there's something out there. Right? I hope that there's something bigger. And that's, I think, where I sit too. It would be a lot easier for me to believe in the God of the Bible and to have kind of this certainty of like what happens after death, and, you know, and if you're a good person, you go to heaven, and like all these things, right? It's like, I'm jealous, honestly, of people who have that still, because I don't. And it's sometimes really scary. The scariest part for me when I decided to not be a Christian any longer was quite honestly telling my parents. And I didn't think that they would abandon me or anything like that. It was just hard. I can only compare it to like somebody coming out to their parents. And I know that's probably a terrible comparison, and I'm sorry if I'm offending you. But as far as my understanding of just like the emotions that run through you when you do something like that, it was like one of the hardest things to sit down and be like, I don't believe in this anymore. And I know it made them sad. But it has opened up so many cool conversations to be had about just why things are the way they are, right? And why do we believe the things that we believe? And we disagree on a lot, and that's okay. And I know that they pray for me every day, and I'm thankful for that. But the thing that was important, and the thing I was scared about when I came out to them, when I told them, was the fact I still, even though I didn't think that they would just abandon me and like leave me out to dry, right, and say I want nothing to do with you, there was still this like, you know, fear that I was losing that. Because one of the things that Christianity brings into your life and holds for you is this community. It's like built-in community. That's what we do, right? As a church, we live life together, right? That's like a thing that gets said a lot. And when I left, I just lost that. I just like didn't have that anymore. I didn't even feel safe around like a lot of the friends I had because they were still in it. And I didn't know how they were going to react to that experience, that questioning, right? I think what I really want this episode to nail home for people, if anything, one, to just get this off my chest, but two, I would hope that people would take from this that it's okay to question things. It's okay to be different. It's okay to believe different things. And it's okay to like have discussion around it in a civilized way, and to be open to the fact that like maybe I'm wrong, or maybe do some research in topics that you feel uncomfortable about and try to understand. I think there's a lot of fear inside of Christianity, inside of religion itself, about this like losing control, right? this like, well, if they start to pull, like I talked about, pulling the thread, right? Following the thread. It's like, if they start to do that, then like the whole thing unravels. And I think I disagree with that. I don't think the whole thing unravels and it just changes is what it is. And some people might end up like me, right, who are agnostic, and other people might still remain Christians or Christ followers, or who knows, maybe they'll go to other religions. I don't really know. But like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, don't be scared to ask the dumb questions, because and to ask hard questions, and to be scared of asking questions. Like I like, it's okay. It's okay to be scared of asking questions. I would come home from like listening to a podcast about deconstruction and being like, I think I believe this. And it was terrifying for me. I was like, I don't want this. I have journal entry after journal entry of being like, I'm losing my religion. And it's like terrifying to me, because I felt like I was losing everything. I was losing my identity. Out of that had to come a new, like, building a new identity of who I was as a person. And I think there's this fear. No, I know. I don't think. I know that there is this fear inside of church goers that when you lose your religion, you lose the good part of you. Because we're told that it's only through God that you can do good things. It's only because of this that you can do good things. It's only because of, whatever. And I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, but I'm going to say it anyways. I choose to believe that I grew up believing that people were inherently bad and they needed God to be good. I have changed my stance on that, and I believe that people are inherently good. I believe that people are hurting and they make mistakes. But ultimately, I think people want to do good and want to see other people succeed. I don't know. I could be wrong. Prove me wrong. I'm trying to think where to wrap this, to be honest. I feel like I could go another tangent. I feel like I'm a little spirally right now, and I apologize for that. I hope this has made sense. I guess that's what I'll leave it with. I hope this has made sense. Let me check my notes. We're scrolling through. We're asking, okay. I guess I'll leave you with this. If this is you, if you've got questions, if you had significant shifts in your belief system, like, and you want to share them, like, it doesn't have to be on the show. It can literally just be in private. But I would love to know. I think I talked about losing the community element of church is really scary. And it wasn't until, honestly, probably this year, maybe last year a little bit, that I started to really build that back. This 3+ years of me feeling isolated and alone and with no community. And I'm building it back. It's coming. It's slow, but it's coming. And yeah. So you just know, if you feel like me, you're not alone. And like I said, if you have an experience, a similar experience, or your beliefs or your worldview are shifting or changing or being different, or maybe they're the same, I don't know, and you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. I'm always open. So you can do that. If you got questions about the show, you got questions about me, you got questions about whatever, you can email me, exhsclub@gmail.com. Instagram DMs are open, EXHS Club. Let me know. I want to hear your stories. I hope this wasn't too rambly. I apologize if it was. Hopefully I can edit and clean it up and make it sound more polished, but it's just raw. It's the real me. It's the real me processing and thinking through these things. And doing this show has opened up some of that can of worms again. And so what I'm saying is I'm here. I'm kind of on the other side of some of it, some of the really hard, nasty stuff of losing my religion. And I want to be there for you, if possible. Again, I ask you, if you got something to say, if you disagree with me, that's fine. Be kind, right? It doesn't cost anything to be nice. If you want to have a discussion around it, let's do it. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to stop rambling. I hope you guys have a very Merry Christmas. Happy holidays if you celebrate any of the other holidays that are happening in this time of the year. I hope you are with loved ones, with friends, with family, with whatever it might be. And enjoy the season, enjoy the time, enjoy the break that we're going to take. If you're really, really missing the show, it's okay. There's 20 other episodes you can go back and listen to. We're going to be back very, very soon. Whole new cast of people. We got 80s and 90s kids coming on. I have an actual therapist coming on. I have a sex expert coming on. I've got homeschool kids from other parts of the country, not just California, coming on. It's going to be fun. We've got some really cool stuff planned for this upcoming year. I hope you stick around. I hope you hit that subscribe. I hope you share the show with your friends. And so until next year, this has been the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. I'm your host, Jacob Gooden, and we'll see ya. All right, peace.